Good evening, everyone. I'm Professor Richard D. Wolff, and today I want to discuss something that, on the surface, looks like another headline in the endless cycle of war. But beneath it lies a profound story about economics, power, and global consequences. You might have seen it flash across your screen. Ukrainian drones strike Russian ship. Then this happened. And perhaps you thought, another military clash in a distant sea. But, my friends, the real explosion here wasn't just on the water. It was in the global marketplace, in the corridors of energy policy, and in the future of world economics. The phrase shockwaves beyond the battlefield captures more than just a poetic metaphor. It defines the new reality of 21st century warfare. When Ukrainian drones struck a Russian naval vessel, the explosion wasn't confined to the Black Sea. It echoed through global markets, trade routes, and political corridors around the world. In our interconnected global economy, even a single strike can send ripples across continents, shaping energy prices, stock markets, and public policy decisions. The battlefield is no longer a physical location. It's an economic and political network that binds every nation together, whether they like it or not. Within hours of the strike, crude oil futures began to climb. Traders, reading the headlines, anticipated potential disruptions in shipping lanes and energy exports. Insurance premiums for vessels operating in the Black Sea surged, reflecting the heightened perception of risk. Financial markets thrive on speculation, and in moments of geopolitical uncertainty, fear itself becomes a commodity. Investors rush to safe havens, currencies fluctuate, and global corporations quietly recalibrate their supply chains. The most remarkable part of this reaction is that no government decree or official sanction is required. The invisible hand of market psychology does the work on its own. Now, here's where the story becomes even more revealing. The impact of the drone strike demonstrates how deeply our daily lives are tied to global conflicts. A fisherman in Greece may see fuel prices rise. A family in Germany may notice their utility bill spike. A commuter in Pakistan might pay more for imported gasoline, all because a ship thousands of miles away was hit by a drone. That is the modern condition. Wars fought by a handful of governments, but paid for by billions of ordinary people. The supposed front line extends into every home, every factory, every wallet. Politically, such incidents test the fragile balance of alliances and rivalries. Western governments rush to interpret the event as a sign of Ukrainian resilience and Russian vulnerability, while Moscow frames it as further evidence of Western aggression by proxy. In both narratives, the truth becomes a tool for propaganda, not understanding. Meanwhile, the real struggle unfolds in boardrooms and trade summits, where energy policies and export routes are redrawn. Power is no longer measured merely in weapons stockpiles, but in the ability to manipulate markets, control narratives, and manage panic. And yet, the most striking feature of all is how normalized these shocks have become. We no longer gasp when a military incident moves oil prices or disrupts shipping. We expect it. That quiet expectation, our acceptance of war as an economic variable, is perhaps the greatest shockwave of them all. Every explosion on a foreign shore has a price tag, every act of aggression a fiscal consequence. The world economy has become a battlefield of its own, one where the weapons are numbers, policies, and profits. So when we say Ukrainian drones struck a Russian ship, we must hear the unspoken echo. Global markets trembled, corporations adjusted, and ordinary citizens prepared to absorb the cost. The explosion may have lasted seconds, but its reverberations will be felt in boardrooms, fuel stations, and dinner tables across the world. The shockwaves go far beyond the battlefield. They reach straight into the heart of the global economy and the lives of all who depend on it. War today is no longer fought only with bullets and bombs. It's waged through balance sheets, sanctions, algorithms, and economic leverage. The drone strike on a Russian naval ship was more than a military maneuver. It was an economic statement. In the modern world, every battlefield decision carries a financial echo. Every explosion triggers a reaction in markets, and every military strategy is shadowed by its economic counterpart. The front lines of war have expanded far beyond trenches and tanks. They now stretch into trading floors, energy markets, and digital currencies. The most sophisticated weapon in modern conflict isn't always a missile. It's the ability to destabilize an economy, disrupt supply chains, or manipulate commodities. When Ukrainian drones hit that Russian vessel, they weren't just damaging a military target. They were indirectly striking at Russia's trade capacity, its naval logistics, and its ability to project power through the Black Sea. In response, global investors, policymakers, and analysts reacted as though they too were under attack. Oil prices fluctuated, the ruble faced renewed pressure, and insurance firms revised their risk assessments for the region. The invisible economy of war, the unseen chessboard of capital, moved in silence but with immense power. Modern warfare at its core has become a contest of economic endurance. Who can finance longer? Who can sustain production, maintain trade, and absorb losses without collapsing from within? These questions now matter as much as military strategy. Both Russia and Ukraine understand this dynamic. Ukraine relies heavily on Western funding, military aid, and financial guarantees to maintain its resistance, while Russia depends on the resilience of its energy exports and the adaptability of its domestic economy under sanctions. Each side is fighting two wars simultaneously, one with drones and missiles, and another with interest rates, embargoes, and global perception. And here's the hidden truth. Every war today is fought in public markets before it is fought on the ground. Sanctions act as economic artillery, meant to cripple industries and starve governments of resources. Trade restrictions become a modern siege, and currency manipulation a form of silent warfare. Even information campaigns, disguised as news or diplomacy, are part of this economic theater, influencing investor confidence and shaping public behavior. The economic front has become the most decisive and enduring battlefield of them all. But while governments and corporations maneuver in this high-stakes game, ordinary citizens become its unintended casualties. Inflation, supply shortages, and job losses ripple outward from the decisions of political elites. The cost of bread in a distant city may rise because of a drone strike on a ship thousands of miles away. The economic front of modern warfare doesn't announce itself with explosions. It seeps quietly into daily life through higher prices, lower savings, and shrinking opportunities. And yet, amid all this complexity, one truth remains painfully clear. In our era, the mightiest army is backed not just by soldiers, but by economic infrastructure. The power to produce, to trade, and to control resources defines victory more than the ability to destroy. The new generals of warfare wear suits instead of uniforms, and their battlegrounds are stock exchanges, not trenches. The fight for dominance has shifted from the field to the financial system, where the world's wealthiest nations compete to weaponize the economy itself. War in the modern era has evolved into one of the most profitable industries on the planet. What was once viewed as a costly and tragic necessity is now, for many corporations and investors, a business opportunity, a cycle of destruction and reconstruction that fuels entire economies. The drone strike on a Russian ship is not just a headline about conflict. It's a reminder of how deeply embedded profit motives are in every aspect of warfare. Behind every missile launched, every drone deployed, and every sanction imposed, there are corporations calculating margins, shareholders anticipating returns, and political figures ensuring the machinery of war keeps turning. From the moment tensions rise, contracts are signed. Defense manufacturers ramp up production, suppliers secure government deals, and consulting firms flood the corridors of power with proposals and bids. The machinery of war does not start with the first explosion. It starts with the budget approvals, the lobbying, and the economic networks that make conflicts sustainable. Companies specializing in weapons, surveillance systems, cybersecurity, logistics, and even private military operations thrive in periods of instability. Their success depends on uncertainty. Peace, to them, represents stagnation. Conflict, on the other hand, ensures steady demand. Consider how nations allocate resources during war. Billions flow into defense sectors while social programs, education, and healthcare face cuts or delays. The justification is always the same: national security. Yet behind this patriotic narrative lies a powerful economic incentive. The defense industry is one of the few sectors where governments guarantee payment no matter the cost. A missile destroyed today means another one must be produced tomorrow. Drones, tanks, ammunition, all are consumable assets, and every war creates a marketplace that demands endless replenishment. It's an economic loop that rewards destruction rather than creation. What makes this system so efficient and dangerous is its invisibility to the public. Most citizens are unaware of how much profit is made from their taxes under the banner of defense spending. Major corporations quietly record soaring quarterly revenues, while ordinary people are told to brace for inflation and budget cuts. Financial markets, in turn, respond positively to escalating conflict. Every time global tension rises, stocks in defense contractors surge. Investors read war not as tragedy, but as opportunity. It's a grim reflection of a world where the suffering of millions translates into gains for a few. The war as business model doesn't end when the shooting stops. The same companies that supply weapons during the war pivot seamlessly into reconstruction afterward. They rebuild the very infrastructure destroyed by the products they sold. Contracts for reconstruction, aid distribution, and development become another phase of profit generation. What appears as humanitarian assistance often masks another economic operation, a continuation of war by other means. The victims of conflict become consumers in a post-war economy designed to benefit the same players who profited from its outbreak. In this sense, modern warfare is less about ideology and more about industry. It operates on the same logic as any market system: create demand, ensure supply, and maintain dependency. The only difference is that in this market, human lives are the collateral. When Ukrainian drones strike a Russian ship somewhere in the background, defense stocks rise, investors celebrate, and contracts multiply. The battlefield may be soaked in blood, but for those invested in the business of war, it glitters in gold. Every war, no matter how distant it seems on the map, eventually finds its way into the daily lives of ordinary people. They are the ones who bear the hidden costs, the inflation, the shortages, the instability, while those who orchestrate and profit from conflict remain comfortably insulated. When a Ukrainian drone strikes a Russian ship, the immediate damage might appear localized, but its ripple effects stretch far beyond the battlefield. Oil prices surge, food supplies tighten, and basic commodities become harder to afford. The tragedy of modern warfare lies not only in the violence itself, but in the quiet suffering it inflicts on millions who had no say in its beginning and no control over its consequences. The average citizen does not see the drones or the missiles. They see their grocery bills. They feel the weight of higher fuel prices, the anxiety of job insecurity, and the creeping realization that global instability has once again invaded their homes. Every spike in energy costs affects families trying to heat their houses. Every disruption in grain exports raises the price of bread on kitchen tables across continents. The poorest communities, already living on the edge of survival, are the first to fall when war turns economic tides against them. Their lives are collateral in a system that values military power over human well-being. Governments justify the economic fallout as an unavoidable consequence of defending sovereignty or democracy. But those words offer little comfort to people struggling to make ends meet. Politicians and defense contractors talk about strategy, deterrence, and long-term gains, while workers, farmers, and families deal with short-term pain. The working class from Ukraine to Russia and beyond becomes the shared casualty of economic warfare. They are the ones sent to fight, the ones taxed to fund the war, and the ones left to rebuild after the dust settles. For them, the promise of victory often feels hollow, because the personal cost of survival grows heavier with every passing month. Even in countries far removed from the conflict, citizens cannot escape its effects. Markets respond to fear faster than they do to peace. A drone strike in the Black Sea can trigger a price surge in Europe or Asia within hours. Inflation spreads like smoke, choking economies that had no role in the fight. Small businesses close, wages stagnate, and social unrest brews quietly beneath the surface. The elite discuss economic resilience in boardrooms, but resilience means something very different to a family choosing between groceries and fuel. The imbalance is stark. War enriches the powerful while impoverishing the powerless. There is a cruel irony in how the costs of war are distributed. The same governments that spend billions on weapons often plead poverty when asked to invest in schools, hospitals, or climate protection. Ordinary people are told to tighten their belts for the sake of national interest, yet their sacrifices only sustain a system that rarely gives back. The wealthy move their assets, corporations adjust their prices, and the media moves on to the next headline. But for ordinary citizens, the war lingers. It lives on in the rising cost of living, in lost opportunities, and in the silent anxiety of a future shaped by decisions made far above their reach. In the end, it is always the same story told in different eras and under different flags. The powerful wage wars, the people pay for them. The explosions may fade, the headlines may change, but the suffering of ordinary men, women, and children remains constant. They are the invisible casualties of modern warfare, paying the highest price for conflicts they never chose to fight. The modern world operates under a grim paradox. The very systems meant to sustain peace are built on the foundations of profit. Every drone strike, every sanction, every troop deployment is not just a matter of national defense. It is also an economic transaction. The global order has been structured in such a way that conflict fuels growth and peace disrupts profit. When Ukrainian drones struck a Russian ship, the event did not merely alter the course of a war. It activated a complex network of financial incentives, market reactions, and industrial gains. In a world driven by profit, war has become less a failure of diplomacy and more a feature of the economic machine itself. To understand this system, one must follow the money. War spending drives research, production, and innovation, not for humanitarian purposes, but for defense industries and corporate shareholders. Every time a government increases its military budget, a constellation of private contractors, manufacturers, and investors benefit. Drones, missiles, communication systems, and logistics operations all form part of a multi-billion-dollar ecosystem that thrives on tension. It is a cycle that rewards destruction. The more weapons that are used, the more must be produced. Peace, by contrast, slows demand, reduces spending, and weakens the flow of profit. Thus, the logic of capitalism subtly aligns with the continuation of conflict rather than its resolution. Even the language of modern politics reflects this economic reality. Terms like security investments, defense partnerships, and strategic deterrence mask what are essentially profit-driven arrangements. International alliances such as NATO or global arms deals are as much about economic interdependence as they are about collective security. Nations locked in geopolitical rivalry become permanent customers in a global arms marketplace. The Ukrainian drone strike is, therefore, not an isolated act. It's part of a self-perpetuating system that transforms fear into financial opportunity. The more uncertain the world feels, the stronger the markets for defense, surveillance, and energy become. This system doesn't stop at the defense sector. The shockwaves of war ripple through agriculture, energy, and finance. Oil and gas corporations see profits soar during instability, grain traders benefit from scarcity, and banks capitalize on volatile markets. Each crisis becomes a stimulus for someone's bottom line. In such an environment, peace is bad business. Stability brings lower prices, predictable markets, and slower profits, conditions the world's largest economic players find less appealing. The pursuit of peace becomes, in effect, an obstacle to the relentless pursuit of growth. What makes this dynamic so dangerous is that it operates quietly, beneath the surface of moral and political debates. Most citizens believe wars begin over ideology, territory, or security, yet behind those narratives lies the steady hand of economic interest. Corporations and investors do not declare wars, but they sustain them. As long as their profits depend on production, disruption, and reconstruction, the incentive to maintain conflict remains powerful. The machinery of war will keep running not because it must, but because it pays. The Ukrainian drone strike revealed once again how seamlessly the global economy absorbs violence into its operations. The stock markets moved, energy prices shifted, and industries adjusted, all as if war were just another economic variable. That is the defining feature of our age, a world where profit has replaced peace as the measure of progress, and where the price of stability is far higher than the cost of conflict. The question that should haunt every discussion of conflict is not who fired the first shot, but who profits when the smoke clears. Behind every war, there is a ledger, one filled with transactions, contracts, and dividends that tell a far more revealing story than any battlefield map. When Ukrainian drones struck a Russian ship, the world's attention focused on the immediate drama, the explosion, the headlines, the retaliation. But beneath that spectacle, a quieter machinery was already in motion. Stocks in defense companies began to rise. Energy traders speculated on disruptions. Insurance firms recalculated their premiums. War, once again, had proven itself to be good business for those who know how to capitalize on chaos. The economics of conflict are rarely discussed in mainstream narratives, yet they determine much of what happens behind the scenes. Weapons manufacturers and defense contractors see their profits surge as demand for arms increases. Oil and gas companies enjoy windfall earnings when geopolitical tension drives up prices. Even tech firms benefit as governments rush to invest in cybersecurity and surveillance infrastructure. What we witness as moral or political struggle is often, at its core, an economic ecosystem that feeds off fear and uncertainty. The same crisis that devastates families and displaces millions becomes a goldmine for corporations and investors with the right connections. Governments, too, play a role in this profit chain. Public money, taxpayer money, is funneled into military budgets, defense programs, and foreign aid packages that often end up in the hands of private enterprises. Every dollar spent on a missile or drone is a dollar earned by someone who builds or maintains them. The rhetoric of national defense or strategic necessity serves to cloak what is essentially a transfer of wealth from citizens to corporations. The blood spilled on the ground is paid for twice, once in human life and again in economic burden. While ordinary people tighten their belts, a handful of firms record record-breaking earnings. There is a reason wars rarely end cleanly. For those profiting from conflict, peace represents an interruption of cash flow. It's no coincidence that after every major war, we witness a flurry of reconstruction contracts, development loans, and new security investments. The same corporations that supplied the weapons are often the first to bid on rebuilding what those weapons destroyed. The cycle renews itself. Profit in destruction, profit in reconstruction. It is a system so deeply entrenched that even calls for peace can be commodified, turned into public relations campaigns or market opportunities. The Ukrainian drone strike is only one episode in a long series of conflicts that reveal this underlying truth. War is sustained not just by ideology or aggression, but by profit. The institutions that could prevent conflict often have little incentive to do so because their funding and influence depend on the continuation of tension. The financial markets, defense sectors, and political elites are intertwined in a global network where instability translates directly into revenue. And so, the real question remains, who profits from war? The answer, as uncomfortable as it may be, is found not in the headlines or speeches, but in the quarterly reports of corporations and the portfolios of investors who thrive when the world burns. Until that question becomes central to every political debate, peace will remain an aspiration, not a policy. War will continue to serve those who can turn human suffering into economic gain, while the rest of the world pays the price for their prosperity.